Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Albuquerque Journal's Town Hall with Sam Bregman. We are really excited to have this Democratic gubernatorial candidate here with us tonight. But before we get going with all the questions, I actually had a few remarks I wanted to make at the top of this. So I'm going to introduce myself. My name is Jay Newton-Small, and I'm the executive editor of the Albuquerque Journal. For those of you who do not know me, my background's actually in politics. I spent more than 20 years in Washington, D.C., covering politics for the Bloomberg News and then Time Magazine. And I've covered arguably about 200 federal races in the 20 years that I was in Washington, D.C. And I will tell you that every single time that candidates hide from you, it is very worrying. And it is a really, really bad thing, despite what some of our friends might say in television. And I've having covered 5 presidential campaigns. I will tell you the candidates that were the best to cover: John McCain, the Straight Talk Express, Barack Obama, George W. Bush. They even made a documentary from his 2004 campaign done by Alexandra Pelosi, who is Speaker Nancy Pelosi's daughter, about how open he was with the press on that campaign, how charming he was, how everybody loved George W. Bush. And even like Bill Clinton, that was before my time, but having covered campaigns where he was stumping for the candidates, he would come back and play hearts with us until literally 3 in the morning, every single trip. You know, he was there all the time, super accessible. Those were the candidates that I always was so impressed with. They were like so amazing, articulate, could like talk to the press, had no fear of the press, were just themselves and were genuine and authentic. The candidates that I think were really failed in that case were the candidates that were closed. You saw Al Gore, and that if you ask Al Gore, and I have asked him this, why he lost that campaign, he will tell you the 3 witches. Those were 3 women from the New York Times, the Washington Post, and the AP who were covering his campaign, who were so pissed off at how closed he was with the press that no matter what he did, in Gore's view, they never gave him a break, that they never let up on him, and they were really, really hard on him because he never ever opened up to the press. It was so closed. Hillary Clinton, I covered both of her campaigns, and I will tell you she did a disservice to herself because those campaigns were incredibly closed. I'll tell you a really quick story about Phil Singer, who was her campaign manager her campaign press secretary in 2004. And Hillary, actually, no, it was 2008, excuse me. And I was literally brand new to Time Magazine. I was doing my first article. It was called a Charticle, where all the campaigns sent me campaign swags. You got like the Mitt Romney glove, the Mitt, and like the John McCain biographical DVD. And I asked all the campaigns, because we can't buy any of these things, it's considered campaign donations, to send us the swag. We would photograph it and send it back. And so there are at this point 26 campaigns. There were a lot of people running for president. And so they all sent us their swag and they sent it back, and we sent it back, except for Rudy Giuliani's campaign, because they were just dysfunctional, and Hillary Clinton's campaign. And so at the end of all of this, I sent a note to all 26 press secretaries and campaign managers. Hey guys, like, thanks for all the campaign swag. Rudy Giuliani and Hillary Clinton's people, it's like you're bucking for a no comment on the puffiest story of the year. Please just send me a t-shirt, right? And so Phil Singer, who was Hillary's campaign press secretary at the time, wrote me back, F you, Jay, way to build bridges, right? So build bridges with this guy who I'd known for 5 years already, and he CC'd all campaign press secretaries and communications directors, right? And so I'm like, wow, well, I guess I'm not gonna get my t-shirt. But I will tell you that Barack Obama's campaign saw that. And so I got a message from Robert Gibbs being like, hey, so I see you're not going to get a Hillary Clinton t-shirt, but we have this great story out of Ohio about how we're the first campaign ever buying our own swag and selling our swag ourselves, and we're collecting all the phone numbers and all of the information from all those people who are buying Barack Obama gear. Do you want to come visit the factory in Ohio? And I was like, sure, I'm going to go visit the factory in Ohio. So I go out to Ohio, I write a 4-page story in Time Magazine about this incredible new innovative way of selling campaign gear. And that is exactly why Hillary Clinton lost that campaign. And like at the end of that, Phil Singer wrote a mea culpa apology to every single person in the Washington Press Corps saying, I'm really sorry, and this was in Politico, you can Google it, I screwed this up. I apologize for screaming at you and cursing at you and being a horrible human to work with. And I apologize to my candidate because I did her a disservice and I really screwed this up, right? And yet, 4 years later, she ran again, and the same press people pretty much ran the similar playbook. A lot of screaming, a lot of nastiness, and very closed campaigns. closed campaigns are not like simply a Democratic thing. I will say it's also a bipartisan thing. Covering Rick Perry's campaign when he was governor of Texas and running for president, also super closed. That did not bode well for Rick Perry. And even Kamala Harris in the last cycle, super closed campaign. That's never good. The worst candidates I've ever seen have been the super closed ones who actually win. And those are the terrifying ones. And I will tell you, Denny Hastert, Speaker of the House from Illinois, he ran incredibly close campaigns. He never spoke to the media when he was Speaker of the House. He always lobbed it off onto Tom DeLay, to his majority leader, to talk to the press. And it turned out Denny Hastert was a pedophile, and he's in jail for it, right? Like, there was something he was definitely hiding. And the other one was Joe Biden. Like, Joe Biden ran an incredibly closed campaign in 2024, and everybody in Washington knew something was wrong. Everyone in Washington knew Uncle Joe. I covered him in his campaigns in 2008, and he was so open. I spent 4 days on the road with him in Iowa. That man would sit in every town hall for hours and hours and hours answering every question. When he ran a campaign that absolutely no one could ask him questions, and he wouldn't debate, he hardly would debate, he wouldn't do anything, that was a really huge red flag, right? That something was really wrong. And it turned out something was really, really wrong, right? So when you run these campaigns that are super closed, it's really dangerous, and it makes me super nervous. And I can tell you I've never met Deb Haaland, but the fact of the matter is we were supposed to have her here at the Journal this Friday, and she canceled on us because she cannot answer any questions. And that is terrifying to me. And that is so scary that if you look at the television screens on either side, we are raising money to do a fund for investigative journalism, because the next 4 years, if she wins, guess what? We're going to be investigating her, because that is scary to me. If you do not have a candidate that cannot answer simple questions or debate an opponent and answer in public what your beliefs are, then that is really, really scary. And that's all I have to say. So, back to the show. The point of this is to talk to Sam Bregman. We're going to change the QR codes on the screens now. You are welcome to scan those QR codes to ask questions if you are in the audience. If you are watching this from home, you can also submit questions on any of our social media channels or on the YouTube channel. If you are in the audience and you do not have a smartphone and cannot scan the QR code, Lucas Pierman, our digital editor right back here, can take your questions and he will get them to us. And we'll be asking all of your questions shortly. So I'm going to let my colleagues introduce themselves, and we'll get on to questioning Sam Bregman. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for being here. I'm Dan Boyd. I'm the Journal's Capitol Bureau Chief up in Santa Fe and cover state politics, and happy to be here this evening.
Hello, everyone. I'm Ryan Botel. I'm the opinion editor, and thank you so much for all your interest in being here today.
Good to see everyone. Thanks for coming. My name is Jeff Tucker. I'm a proofreader and occasional columnist.
Thank you so much. Well, I think, Sam, you probably need no introduction to this audience, but for anyone watching at home and for those who will watch on C-SPAN, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and give an opening statement?
Certainly. Thank you so very, very much to the Albuquerque Journal and to all of you in the audience here and everybody that's watching this streaming broadcast. I just want to say, first of all, I'm blessed to be here. I'm the district attorney, and I did this, I don't know, a few months ago. And I had a blast, and certainly that was a focus all on crime, if you will, as the DA. But I've really been blessed to be here in Albuquerque, and my entire adult life, I've been married to the same wonderful woman for 37 years. I have, actually, my daughter is in the audience. Wave, Jesse, thank you. Wait, you're pointing to somebody else. Oh my gosh, you showed up. My youngest son, AJ, and his fiancee, Lauren, are here as well. So this is awesome. It's a family affair. I didn't even, all right. Well, thank you all, and to my family. I have 3 adult children. I have 4 grandchildren, all under the age of 4 years old. That's obviously, since I have my daughter here, my 2 grandchildren, her two daughters, my granddaughters, are at home with their grandmother. So that's where she is. But I am thrilled to be here, and you know, I'm running for governor. I'm running for governor because I think all of you will agree with me that New Mexico has never truly lived up to its potential. This is an amazing place. I love New Mexico. I have. I came out here when I was 17 years of age, and I never left. This place is very, very special. But I'm also tired of mediocrity. I'm tired of mediocrity, and I want excellence in state government, and I want excellence in New Mexico. And we can do so much better. What am I doing now?
Hand on up here. There you go.
And we can, is that better? Oh, I'm sorry. And we can do so much better. Now, this is interrupting my opening, really? It's all good. So I think we can do so much better. Obviously, when we're first in crime and 50th in education, when we have a health care issue that's not an issue but a crisis in this state, and when we have economic opportunity and development and affordability issues that we can do so much better in as well. I just really believe in New Mexico. I believe in a great future for New Mexico. I'm excited about the possibilities. But we need a leader, our next leader, to really lead this state into the future because the opportunity is there. And this election is not about the next 4 years. It's about what direction this state goes in the next 40 years. So with that, I'm happy to answer questions. I'm thrilled to be here. You all know I have been ringing the bell about debates for a long time now, and because it's about democracy. It's a fundamental principle of democracy for someone that wants to lead your state. And I'm very transparent with my policy issues, and for those of you that don't get a question answered today or something, or don't get that opportunity, I have 189 pages of policy up on my website. I encourage anyone and everyone to go there. I don't expect everyone to agree with everything that I say, but at least you know where I stand, and at least you know what my vision is for New Mexico. So thank you again.
I should say, I'm going to ask the audience, as enthusiastic as you are, to not applaud after every answer because we're going to be here all night if you do. So just at the very end, everyone can applaud for everything, okay? Thanks.
I guess I'll start off. Sam, you've been running for governor for more than a year now. What have you kind of learned out there on the campaign trail, and how have you kind of juggled that campaigning with your job as DA here in Bernalillo County?
Well, doing both jobs, being the district attorney here, also, by the way, being the chairman of the Organized Crime Commission, but also running for governor. My wife has said to me a number of times, you ought to have your head examined. But I absolutely love New Mexico. I think it's absolutely worth it. When I'm traveling around the state, I will tell you the number one thing that's asked of me, besides the general issues, is are we going to have a state where our kids and our grandkids can stay here if they want and have opportunity? And that's a big part of it, because this state, no matter any way you look at it, is all about families. From the north of Taos all the way to Las Cruces, and from Gallup to Tucumcari, and everywhere in between. This state is about families, and we have to improve the quality of life for folks. And that's why I'm running, and I'm energized when I go out and amongst the campaign. This kind of stuff is a lot of fun for me. I don't know why anyone wouldn't want to participate in this. This is fun. This is hearing what's on people's minds and be able to give them your vision for the future. So I'm enjoying this, and I do this all over the state.
So one of the big X factors in the primary is going to be independent voters voting for the first time. How are those voters changing the race, and what would you say to a moderate independent voter who is unsure of who or even what primary election to vote in?
Well, I think it's fair to say that most people, if you look at the political spectrum, consider me a moderate, consider me somewhat of a centrist or something along those lines. By the way, my parents were introduced by Hubert Humphrey. I was a precinct chair in the Democratic Party at the age of 18, and I went on to be the state chair of the Democratic Party here in New Mexico. But I think it's about time. It's absolutely about time that we have this semi-open primary. For too long, until this year, independents throughout the entire state, taxpayers, were paying for primary elections and not getting to participate. That in itself, I think, is just wrong. So I'm excited that they're getting to participate. I also am excited about at least the preliminary numbers I'm seeing is that more often than not, these independent voters are picking up the Democratic ballot right now because they know how important this primary, this Democratic primary is in this state. And it's going to have a huge effect on who the next governor is. And I would venture to say that the winner of this primary is going to be your next governor.
Just to follow up on that, we have Kathy D, who asks, I just moved from New Mexico to New Mexico from Colorado. I have always been an independent, so tell me why I should vote for you, a Democrat.
Well, there's lots of reasons I can say, and I don't know specifically what issue is of hers most concern, but I will tell you, as the DA and in my adult life, I'm someone who is results-driven. I believe in getting things done. And New Mexico has a ton of challenges. I listed some of them in my opening. But we have a lot of challenges, and we have to get someone, and the next governor needs to be someone who gets things done. We've done that at the DA's office. In fact, when I got in there, and this is no criticism of my predecessor, but the morale wasn't the best. We were down a lot of lawyers. We hired lawyers. We staffed up because the caseloads were crushing, and all of a sudden, we're getting more convictions. We're holding more people pretrial detained. We're getting real results. In fact, we were just named one of the top best places to work in the state of New Mexico. And I think that goes, first of all, to the amazing staff that is working in our office, and certainly the executive staff and the chief deputies and our district manager. But overall, I think you can build a culture in government to where people actually want to come to work and get something accomplished and feel good about what they're doing and looking forward to going to work. I want to transfer that kind of mentality to all of state government. There has to be a sense of urgency. If we, and I can go into the various issues, but if you just talk about health care, for example, we're the only state in the union that's losing doctors. Every state wants more doctors. We have to have a sense of urgency, and I know we just passed some medical malpractice legislation. The governor signed it, and that's an important first step. But there are so many other things we have to do right away, and the sense of urgency is desperately needed, not just in healthcare, but in all entities, when it comes to public safety, when it comes to education, and that's what I'm going to bring, a sense of urgency, and we get things done.
So speaking of being an independent or appealing to independence, Brenda Kilmer asks, I'm a supporter of Mr. Bregman, but I'm confused as to why he would accept campaign contributions from individuals who also financially supported President Donald Trump. I do not feel that is appropriate. Could Mr. Bregman please explain why?
Well, first of all, let me just share that I think our campaign has received over 4,000 different contributions, and I don't by any means spend my time looking at every single individual on that list. But I'm very proud of the fact that 80% of the money that our campaign has raised has come from New Mexicans. That's really important to me because we're running for the governor of New Mexico, not some national campaign. And I think it's important to shed light on that. I'll also say this. I have a lot of friends. I've been here my entire adult life. I know a lot of people in this town, in this state, and some of them are very close friends. And some of them absolutely disagree with me maybe on our politics. But they see me, known me for so long, they believe in my leadership abilities and qualities. And that's what I think has spurred a lot of these folks giving to me. But I will say we're facing a big double standard here. Some of those folks they're complaining about to me are the same folks that have given to the current governor, who's also a member of my party. In other words, they've given to MLG, and they've given to me, and all of a sudden, they're attacking me for that. And that, to me, is hypocritical, but even more importantly, my opponent, who refuses to even sit up here on the stage with you all and answer questions, is attacking me for that, and putting that in people's minds that somehow I'm going to be a Trump supporter of some sort. I don't know. But she's also attacking me for being successful. She's actually attacking me out there for being a success. I have stood up and been a voice for people at every level, for victims who've been raped by their teachers, for so many different people have stood up for their constitutional rights and human rights in federal court and state court, and yes, I've been successful at it. I'm very proud of that. I don't back away from that. But here's the deal. New Mexico needs more success. We all do. Every single citizen of this state needs the opportunity to have success. And for somehow to attack me because I've been successful, I think says a lot about my opponent in itself.
I'll circle back to what you mentioned, the legislature and steps they took to reform medical malpractice laws. Some other healthcare-related bills didn't pass. I know the group New Mexico Safety Over Profit was pushed back against some of those changes, and I believe some of your campaign personnel have connections to that organization. Just wanted to, if you can address that, and then also how would you kind of rate what the legislature accomplished in terms of healthcare reform and what still needs to be done?
Yes, I will tell you, my manager, Mr. Lipschutz, was involved in that previous entity. He's not been involved in it, but here's the deal. I'm the one running for governor, and I'm going to tell you what we need to do when it comes to healthcare as far as I'm concerned, the things I think. I think the legislature, that what I already mentioned, the medical malpractice legislation, important first step. But we only got 2 interstate compacts done, and I think there's 9 or 10 more of them that need to be done. I really believe that. So let's get them all signed. Number 2, I firmly believe that it's time, because we are the only state in the union that charges tax, gross receipts tax, on medical services. So you can't, if you're a doctor, you can't pass Medicare or Medicaid on to the patient. So you automatically make 8% less if you practice medicine here than you do in any other state in the union. That's not going to make us any more attractive to have doctors in. For every year a doctor practices medicine in New Mexico, we should reduce 1 year of their medical school debt. We have to make this the most attractive place to be a doctor, because we are in a crisis right now. We are in a doctor crisis shortage. Oh, I'm sorry. Here we go again. We are in a doctor crisis shortage again. And if we don't really have a sense of urgency, we're going to miss out again. We're also short 6,000 nurses. But let me keep going. We need to have a robust tax credit for doctors and medical providers who are willing to practice in rural and underserved areas. Medical malpractice premiums, we need to be making a dollar-for-dollar tax credit for medical malpractice premiums. We have to make this the most attractive place to practice medicine in the country if we want to increase our numbers. We already know we have the best weather, the best environment, the best natural resources, the best natural beauty, and the best food. I think we can all agree on that. And we can look at me and realize I've been all over the state lately, eating at every restaurant there is out there. But here's another issue that I think is really important when we discuss about making this as attractive as possible for healthcare providers, and that is this. These are educated young doctors that we want to move here with their families. Is the place they want to set down roots first on their list when that place has a reputation of a crime problem and being first in crime or 50th in education? These are issues we have to work on all together. We have to be able to walk and chew gum at the same time. We have to do some of these things and do them right away when it comes to an urgency for healthcare. But we also have to work on all these other issues that also affect whether or not a doctor and his family want to come here.
Following up on that, Monica Martinez asks, rural hospitals across New Mexico are struggling. What immediate action would you take to keep healthcare accessible outside of Albuquerque and Santa Fe?
I just listed some of the things that I thought we have to have a sense of urgency about. Some of those that I just listed, in fact, all of them, absolutely apply to bringing in more doctors. The rural health care tax credit that I just suggested addresses that specifically. I also think there's plenty of opportunity to continue. We have colleges and community colleges throughout the state, and we want to make sure that they are having career paths for folks that want to get in nursing and other medical providers. We have to do that outside of just Albuquerque and Santa Fe. We have to do that throughout the entire state. One of the other issues is housing. A lot of folks, if you want to be a nurse in a rural area, you may not have the ability to have the kind of housing you want. We have to address that. We have to address it one way or the other, and we have to recognize that that is a hurdle for a lot of small rural health, small communities when it comes to rural health. I'll also say this. This isn't just about the quality of care and the accessibility and affordability for folks that live in rural areas. But oftentimes, look at Clayton, New Mexico, for example. That hospital up there is the economic engine for that community. If we don't make sure we keep that going in the right direction, not only do we lose all of that care that we need to make sure they're getting, but and those patients end up in emergency rooms in Albuquerque or Santa Fe, but we lose an economic base, and that community just continues to suffer in a big way. So we have to do everything we can to help our rural areas. And it wasn't any help that Trump, with the big, beautiful bill is what he called it, cut millions out of Medicaid. Whether we like it or not, 40% of our state is on Medicaid. That's a big number. And when you cut hundreds of millions of dollars out of funding for this state, that is going to have an immediate impact. And I'm grateful to the legislature. I'm grateful to the governor for those special sessions they did of backfilling on the short term. But we've got a long-term issue coming if these kind of cuts continue. We really do.
Following up on this, Sherry Robinson asks, it's clear that New Mexico's malpractice law is driven off doctors. The legislature passed one reform, but needs to do more. You've proposed an income tax credit for doctors on their malpractice costs. All this does is shift the cost to the state, i.e. taxpayers. Are you serious about healthcare access, and do you understand how angry people are about this issue?
Oh, I understand it all right. I have two of my children here, and they'll remind me all the time about their grandmother, my mother, who has to wait 4 months for a doctor's appointment. She reminds me all the time of it, and I absolutely understand that. That shouldn't happen for her, nor should it happen for any New Mexican. And so I do understand the severity and the urgency of fixing this problem, and I'm going to work my tail off to bring some solutions to the forefront to get it done.
Along those lines, Kurt Zietler asks, I moved here from Texas 3 years ago, and I cannot find a primary care physician in Albuquerque. There are none taking new patients. I'm still having to see my PCP in Texas. I think the question just went away. Sorry. So I will ask on his behalf, what can you do immediately in the legislature to alleviate this problem?
Some of the things I've already said. We have to make this more appealable. So interstate compacts. There's 9 more that need to be signed. We have to do that right away. And we have to, again, do it fast so that we are opening up to other licensed doctors to be able to practice here. Behavioral health's a big issue on that side as well. Also, gross receipts tax, another example. Nobody can afford to be in private practice right now. It's getting tough to even be able to practice medicine in private practice. So all of these things, and I don't want to keep repeating myself, but those 5 or 6 things that I've listed already are things that I'm going to do.
This is the last question that I have on my list for healthcare, and this is from a name you might recognize. Diane Denish asks, as governor, will you work with the AG to vigorously defend HB 99, the medical malpractice reform bill, which trial lawyers are preparing to challenge? And as governor, will you support to end venue shopping for medical malpractice litigation?
So the venue shopping is more of an issue for the Supreme Court because they're going to weigh in on that, the state Supreme Court. They dictate the rules of civil procedure, and I'm sure they're going to have a say-so on whether or not what's current or what is proposed in the future is constitutional. That's number one. And
The audience member, one of the audience members has asked, can you please explain venue shopping?
venue shopping means which district a particular lawsuit is filed in, whether or not it's Santa Fe, Albuquerque, Las Cruces, any of the various districts. And I forgot the first part of that question, but from
Will you
Lieutenant
defend
Governor
HB
Diane Dennis.
99?
Yeah, well, listen, that's the law, and I have no problems whatsoever defending that. That's what I've said it a couple of times. It's an important first step. But just because that happened doesn't mean what I've been saying before that happened isn't necessary. And that's we're going to continue to have to make sure we're locking the door with trial lawyers, doctors, and insurance companies and administrators of hospitals in a room to make sure we hammer out things to make everything a lot better than they are. I mean, there's issues with insurance. There's issues with hospitals of the way they deal with things. There's issues with every part of our healthcare system right now needs to be looked from top to bottom, bottom to top, on how we can improve affordability and accessibility for people. And I know it as well as anybody when it comes to waiting and when it comes to not having a primary care physician you can even find one. I get how important that is.
Want to switch gears a little bit. You said in a recent televised interview that you wouldn't support your opponent if she's the nominee due to some of the things that have taken place over the course of the campaign and posting certain things on her website. Wanted to ask if that is still your stance, and has this race become kind of personal for you?
Yes, it is still my stance. It doesn't mean I'm going to run out and support a Republican either. I want to be that clear. But in her attack and her attacks on me being successful, her and or her campaign or jointly thought it would be appropriate to post the UPC codes of houses that I'm associated with. Houses including where my mother lives, houses that include where my daughter lives. That is an epic failure of judgment. The idea to get a cheap political gain so that somehow you can back up your trying to articulate that I'm rich and say, oh, look at all the houses he owns. I am the district attorney in this state, in this county, and I'm the chairman of the Organized Crime Commission going after cartels every single day. And the audacity, knowing that she would endanger my family. It's only 1 or 2 clicks away, and their response is, well, some of that's public information. So what? But putting it up on a website to gain some kind of advantage or back up your argument that I shouldn't be governor because I own more than one house. We need a governor who's going to use judgment when they're making decisions and can't be so narrow-minded that they're just focused on the win in a campaign and the politics. These are important things, and anybody that's going to endanger my family, there's no way I'd ever vote for them.
Let me follow up on that if I could. Has the Holland campaign apologized to you for that?
No. The question was, has the Holland campaign apologized? No, and I don't know that I don't even think she said anything about it other than, and I've addressed her personally right on stage in front of people about this, but no. But that may be the appropriate thing to do, but I don't know that that's going to all of a sudden make me think that she's got the judgment to be the next governor.
I wanted to ask you too, a lot of the Democratic leadership in the legislature has endorsed your opponent in the primary. If you are successful and are elected, would that make things difficult for you, going into the 60-day session next year? Or how would you plan to work with those members of your party who have endorsed her?
No, and I'm going to work with everybody in the legislature. It's going to be every Democrat and the Republicans as well. if we want to truly represent every New Mexican and move us all forward, this is a lost art apparently in politics because we have such extremes now. We blast the other side depending on what letters in front of their name, and we're unwilling to even have discussions about what's best for New Mexico. I don't care if the idea is a good idea and we can improve the quality of lives of people in New Mexico. I don't care where it comes from. Just like too often now, we don't sit down and have the body politic, the legislature and the governor need to be able to sit across from each other and on individual meetings and talk about what are the needs of the district and the people that you represent. What is important to you? And this is what's important to me, and find that common ground and work towards getting things done. Too often, it's just, no, I'm not with him because he doesn't support me on this, so I'm not going to support him on anything at all. No, it can't be like that, and I am willing absolutely to put all the time necessary and needed to work with legislators. And I know, obviously, most, if not all, of the Democratic legislators and many of the Republican legislators, because for the last 3 years I've been trying to get juvenile crime laws passed as the DA. I get that. But you've got to have that ability to sit down and not hold grudges, not any of that stuff. Just work with people to better the lives of people. We have really tough challenges. And I do have a lot of thoughts on, I think, how we can fix Santa Fe a lot. Not all the legislature agrees with me, and this may really piss them off, I don't know. But if I can, I just want to touch on that for a second.
Well, actually, this speaks to this. Avery Castillo asks, "Your Fixing Santa Fe plan criticizes career politicians. What reforms would you implement to make state government more accountable?"
I'm going to take a quick sip of water. So I have several ideas. I support what's most recently passed in the constitutional amendment to pay our legislators. I support that because I don't think we're doing us a service in New Mexico by having only those who are retired or those who are wealthy to be able to serve in our legislature to make our laws. I want every single person who has a passion or a yearning to help in the process of this great democracy that we have to be able to participate. And too often, people don't have that chance or opportunity. I think we're the only unpaid legislature still left. I certainly support that constitutional amendment, and I think that should happen. But there's other things we could do as well. And some of these may be somewhat more controversial, I don't know. But I do believe in term limits after a certain length of time. After a certain length of time, I think we need fresh blood. We need new people. And the power of incumbency is real. We all know that. If you're an incumbent, you have a great opportunity to continue to be an incumbent. And so I do believe, and I'm not saying like one term and that's it, but I do think there should be term limits. And I think we wait to the last minute so often when it comes to a 30-day session, and the last day of the session or the last 24 or 36 hours, everything's being rushed through. Nothing's getting the kind of real deliberative debate that we would want necessarily. Things are being pulled out of committee, and on the last minute it's done. I think we need longer sessions. We've got a lot of challenges. I'm going to keep saying that because I think everybody in this room knows that. And you can't solve these with just folks coming together for 30 days or 60 days. And I know there are interim committees, and I think that if you have a paid full-time legislature, and that doesn't mean they're in session all the time, but it means when you're talking about, for example, what we just were, health care, and all those important issues, and wanting to make sure a legislature hears all sides of that issue to make sure it's the right thing, that takes time. You don't need to rush down a bill the last 12 hours of a session, get it on the floor, and have a debate when it really hasn't been flushed out. So I'm for term limits. I'm for paid legislators. I'm also, the one more thing I'll say is we have to fix our capital outlay program. Our capital outlay program is not working. It is not working. Thank you. It is not working the way it should. because we need a lot of infrastructure built out there, and it's not happening in a timely basis.
Well, to that end, I'm going to turn to some education questions now. Patty Smith asks, I've lived in New Mexico since 1982. The solution to our education failure being the worst state in the nation to show progress has always been to spend more money. Dollars produce results. That has never worked. We are still last. What are your plans to move New Mexico forward, and how will you hold the Department of Education responsible?
There was a time when Mississippi and New Mexico used to battle for who was 50th on the rankings of education. Today, unfortunately, we're still 50th. Mississippi is 15th or 16th, something along those lines. They're ranked 15th or 16th. We're still 50th. I think it comes down to accountability. I know the question was involving money. We already pay, I think, per pupil, right there in the medium or above, perhaps in this part of the country. But I do think accountability means a tremendous amount, and I think we need to give everybody kind of we need to hold everybody accountable. And let me say how we do that. Let's take the school districts, for example. We have a lot of them. I do believe they should have some local control over some local issues. I know there was a fight recently about how many days the kids should be in school. I think local districts have a better handle on that. But let's make sure if you're a school district, you are posting for the entire community that you serve your goals for your kids. What the goals are. What's the graduation rate? What's the success rate of your kids? And then let's post how they're doing. Then let's post how they actually are performing. And let's not do it once a year, but let's do it multiple times a year so people can really figure out whether or not their school system's working. And when I talk about holding everybody accountable, it also means, for example, administration folks. In other words, principals, the folks running the schools themselves. Same thing with teachers. And by the way, I'm 100% in support of supporting all of our teachers. I think we all are. We want great teachers, and we should pay them greatly. And we can do that. Holding parents accountable. We lead the country, another sad statistic I'm spouting off here, but we lead the country in chronic absenteeism. If the kid's not in the schoolhouse, they're not going to learn. And part of that, and I'm not talking about the senior that skips the last 2 classes to take his girlfriend to Sonic for a burger or something. I'm talking about a 3rd grader or a 4th grader who hasn't been in school for 2 weeks and nobody's heard from the family at all. And we can learn some from our public charter schools that are operating right here in New Mexico already. I've had the opportunity and the blessing of giving a commencement speech at one of them, and they serve a very, very poor part of Albuquerque. Their families come from a very poor part. And they had 47 6th graders. When they graduated high school, they had 47 seniors graduating, and every single one of them was going to the military, a community college, a trade school, a 4-year college. And I obviously have to ask the question, what's the special sauce for your success? How are you pulling this off? They said, because we engage with the families. And the day a kid's not there, we want to hear from the family that maybe the kid's under the weather, fine, but we hear from them, we communicate. And I know that's on a much smaller scale, but we have to do so much better when it comes to communicating with families at schools, because we have to hold the parents responsible. We want the kids to show up for school. And I get it. There's a lot of single-parent families out there who are working two jobs, and they may not be there when that child's supposed to get on the bus. But let's figure it out and make sure how we solve that problem rather than just ignoring it. We have to have a culture, I believe, very strongly, that education is really important. And we have to have a governor who's going to use the bully pulpit at every opportunity. I think it's the most important issue for the future of the state of New Mexico is education.
To that end, Maria Gonzalez asks, on education, what do you believe previous administrations got wrong?
I don't think it's so much. I don't think it's so much that previous administrations got it wrong. I think people have worked real hard at this, and I do not have any criticism of our current governor about this. But I will say this: I think when you have 6 PED secretaries in a span of 6 years, that that causes a real lack of continued leadership in a direction. And I think when you have to start over again as a new secretary every year, that's not beneficial. I think we need someone who's going to be there and be a strong leader as the Secretary of Education. And you need a governor, I think, who's going to make sure every single day, every single opportunity, they are talking about how important education is. I think you all know this from covering me as the DA. I've been in 25 schools talking to kids, not just about gun violence, not just about drugs, but about how important it is to be in school. All those things. I think it's critically important that the next governor makes education the #1 priority, education and child well-being.
To that end, Lisa Dominici asks, how will you address the rise of violent crime and guns in youth? And following up on that, Ron Schwartz asks, how do you get the legislature to move on youth with guns and the crime issue?
I think it's no secret to this panel, but also to most people in Albuquerque know that this is one of my biggest concerns. I will tell you overall crime is getting better in Albuquerque and actually overall in New Mexico. Violent crime is down. I know what goes across my desk. Violent crime is down, property crime is down, but juvenile crime, absolutely going in the wrong direction. Juvenile crime with guns, going absolutely in the wrong direction. I'm going to tell you a stat that every time I have to say it, because I think it explains where I'm at, it's very sad. I have indicted my office in 3 years, 77 juveniles for murder. That's unacceptable. I have proposed that the Children's Code, which dictates the criminal laws for how we deal with our children, our juveniles, has not been updated since before 1993. That was before the iPhone that's sitting in your pocket was even invented. We have a lot of fixing to do on that Children's Code. And I proposed as the DA 36 different changes 2.5 years ago to that Children's Code. There are things we have to do to have that law meet what's going on in the streets today as opposed to 1993. But just as important, if not more important, when it comes to juvenile crime, is when that kid first steals his first car, the first time he gets involved in the criminal justice system, and we're seeing it at a younger and younger age now. Let's say they're 15 years old and they steal a car, they get caught. We have to send in, right then and there, the resources to help that family and help that kid. Why was that kid out at 2 a.m. in the morning? That's what a social worker and family intervention folks can figure out. Why was he out at 2 a.m., 4 a.m.? Why hasn't he been in school for 2 weeks? Where are the parents? What kind of actual environment is this kid in on a given daily basis? But we don't do that right now. We don't do it. We instead send them home when they get arrested, and then they see a judge the next day or the day after, and the judge tells them, don't do this again. And now, after their 4th stolen car in 3 months, still no consequence whatsoever. The only thing they've learned, I can get away with this. That's what they learn, and so they keep escalating. And it is so easy for a kid to buy a gun right now in this town, in this state. And what happens is they escalate their behavior because they got away with it all this time. They buy a gun, they take a picture of themselves, they put it on social media, they get some other people to like it, and they think, that's what makes me popular. Now I'll get in a stolen car and drive down the road and shoot out the window, and someone gets killed. And then I'm asking to put the kid behind for decades. We didn't do the dead person any good, And we certainly didn't do that child when we had the opportunity any good. Juvenile crime is a passion for me. It's something we've worked on. I talk about a zero tolerance for guns on school campuses. It's the most scary thing anybody could ever think of is a gun on a school campus. I deal with this every day. It is very, very frustrating. Now let me answer the second part of that question, which is how do we get the legislature to do something?
Yeah, there's another question here that says, we've watched this plan die, your juvenile plan year after year. What's your plan B?
Well, first of all, there's no quit in me. I think anybody that knows me knows there's no quit. That's number one. Number two, I think as your next governor, I will use every lever of government I can use to convince certain people that we need more behavior health and mental health and intervention for our young people. I also believe there are certain parts of the law, being a prosecutor and dealing with an epic problem when it comes to juvenile crime every day, that I can continue to articulate it to legislators. I'll be very frank with you. This is the truth. I'm very frustrated at my own party in the legislature over this issue. Frustrated isn't probably a nice word. We see right now kids going on certain apps, and it takes them 2 hours to locate someone who's willing to sell them a gun on a street corner. And if they don't get hurt in that transaction, then they come back and use that gun in awful ways, unfortunately, too often. I've sent up legislation 2 years in a row. Not once has it hurt a hearing, just having serious penalties for people who are willing to sell or transfer guns to kids. What was the response? My party didn't even get a hearing on it. My frustration is boiling over on this issue, and I think as the next governor, I'll be able to articulate that in a very meaningful way to the legislature.
Going a little bit earlier, Beverly Garcia asks, many people seem to think that CYFD's problems will be resolved by turning management over to a policy-making committee that is outside of the control of the governor. What do you think about a policy committee running not only CYFD, but the state agency, any state agency in general?
You know, for some time now, I've been asked that question since the legislature has been bringing that issue up, and I said I'm somewhat open-minded. I'm somewhat going against that idea now, because here's what, and we're going to talk about CYFD. Let's talk about CYFD. I think that we need to have it under the governor's authority so that the governor and the secretary of CYFD can actually hold people accountable on what's going on in CYFD. The biggest single thing that has to happen right away with CYFD is to staff up. We have 30% vacancy rates on any given day, and their caseloads, with the people that are left there, their caseloads are astonishingly big. It's unacceptable. And the people that are still left back there doing that work are working double overtime shifts, and until recently in offices. And they're getting burned out because they're working with some of the most troubled kids in our state. It's a really hard job. And just like I did with the DA's office, where we hired over 80 lawyers in the last 3 years, we need to staff up when it comes to caseworkers at CYFD in a big, meaningful way. That's the number one thing we should do. I also personally think that we ought to separate juvenile justice from abuse and neglect and make those two separate agencies so they can focus on what they're doing. Right now, it seems to me, and I know there are people in this audience that have worked at CYFD, and there's so many amazing people at CYFD still to this day that really work their hearts out and work very, very hard. But I also know that at the end of the day, we have to have a CYFD department that is run in a way that is accountable. And that means holding everybody accountable in CYFD. And so I do think that not only do we need to separate them, because currently CYFD is asked to do so many different things, they don't do any of them really well. Let's change that, and we can change that.
I wanted to ask you, affordability has become kind of a buzzword in politics, and as we've seen gas prices rise, inflation, straining a lot of New Mexicans, yet at the same time, the state has seen more and more money flow into its coffers as a result. How do you think New Mexicans should get some share of that money, and should it be returned to to taxpayers as rebates, or what's your plan for addressing affordability?
Dan, you may have addressed this in a previous article you wrote when you asked me, I think, or somebody did from the paper. But yes, listen, regardless of what you think of this war in Iran, we know that people are suffering. People are suffering with high gas prices. People are suffering with high grocery prices. You know, all the groceries get to the grocery store with diesel in the truck, right? And diesel prices are through the roof. Gas prices are through the roof. It's hurting people, and people are suffering. And because of all this increase in prices for fuel, the price of, oil, barrel of oil is going up too. And we happen to be the second largest producer of oil and gas in the entire country. So that is a benefit to our coffers. We are going to get between $500 million and $1.5 billion extra dollars that we had not planned on based on the spike in the oil price alone. And I've made it very clear that I think because it's the people's resource, it's their natural resource, all of New Mexico's natural resource, and because of the suffering going on, because of the increase in oil price, that I think we should give the money back to the people. And the way I say doing that is the following. If a family makes $200,000 or less, I say every single family member, including the kids, should get a $500 check back from the state of New Mexico. And let's just say that's a family of 4, and let's say they make $100,000 a year. That's $2,000 that can help offset the price of gas that's through the roof, the groceries that's through the roof, and I think makes it really meaningful. There's also a lot of other things I want to do when it comes to affordability issues. I want to double the child tax credit. I want to double the working family tax credit. I want, to be very clear about this, we are not a poor state. We have $75 billion in wealth funds. If you're 65 and older, I'm going to push like hell to get the legislature to eliminate personal income tax for anybody 65 and older. Because I think when you're on a fixed income, and we know this, when you're on a fixed income and these prices are shooting through the roof like they are, it makes it extremely difficult. And so I don't believe that is a number that's going to hurt us to where we can't afford to continue operating government the way we do. But I do believe we need to start thinking about how hard it is and how many people are suffering out there with the cost of so many of these things.
On your affordability plan, Rob Durham asks, your affordability plan talks about building 5,000 affordable homes. How quickly could New Mexicans realistically expect to see housing costs come down?
By the way, I think I've lived this in my entire life. Home ownership has always been the pathway to the middle class because you build equity in that home and you are able, as you work, to continue to build equity and you move on to the next home as your family grows, for example. And if you look at someone who's rented their whole life at the age of 65 or someone who owns a home, the person who owns a home's net worth is substantially different than the person that just rented the whole time. We know that. I want people, they used to say live the American dream by home ownership. I still believe in that American dream. I think we need to make it as affordable as possible. And so right now we have a stagnant housing market in New Mexico where people are affording these expensive rents and sometimes struggling to afford them, but nonetheless a $2,000 a month rent, but they don't have the down payment for that starter home. And that's why I want to set aside a fund to help first-time home buyers. And specifically, it would go like this. For a first-time home buyer, if their down payment's $25,000 to $50,000 for a $350,000 house, for example, the state provides that down payment and takes a second mortgage on the house. It's a loan to the new home buyer, but it's interest-free. And as long as they live in it, or until they sell it, or then they move out of it, they get that interest-free loan going, and that second mortgage is on the house. If they move, if they sell it, they got to pay off that second mortgage. That money comes back in, it's used, it continues to be used for others. That's one of the ways that I'm encouraging and hoping that we can get more home ownership. And right now in our housing market, and by the way, that also frees up apartments. When that person is now a homeowner, those apartments become available for people that really need that housing. I think at the end of the day, though, what it comes down to is we have to make sure we're making it as easy as possible for new housing projects. Right now, developers don't find there's any real market because of that problem with not enough people having a down payment, so they're not building starter homes. This kind of program that I'm suggesting would help spur that development on. And I think that's really important, something we can do. Let me talk about housing in general and apartments and affordable housing. We have gotten to a point, I think, in local government where they need to be put on a shot clock. I think local government, when they get a new affordable apartment complex proposal, when people are willing to invest capital into the actual project, when jobs are going to be created building those projects, when people who really need that apartment are going to be able to get that apartment, too often those projects linger for a year or a year and a half. And that's not right. We can do better. And I say that if it's a project that doesn't need a public hearing, you have 90 days. And I'm throwing out these, I'm flexible on these time frames, but 90 days as a city, a local government, to approve them or not approve them. If it makes a public hearing, then maybe it's 120 or 160 days. But the point is, we got to put the government on a shot clock, realizing if we don't, we're losing opportunity in investments, and we're losing opportunity in jobs, and we're losing opportunity to make sure we have enough affordable housing for people, and that is a real problem right now. So cutting red tape, a shot clock on local government, there's lots of things we can do to increase and speed up the amount of housing that is available for New Mexicans.
Juan Telez asks, if elected, what's the fastest one thing you could do to lower costs for working families?
Well, the fastest one thing I can do right off the bat is send some of this oil money back to the folks, right? I mean, that's the fastest thing. If the legislature, if I can get them to agree with me, which I think I can, and get money back in their hands, that's one thing. If I can get us to look at the overall tax structure and tax code, I want to double the tax credit for working families. I want to double the child care tax credit, the child tax credit. I want to make sure, by the way, we stand up our child care and early child care and education program to where it really is making sense and working for people, because I think that can be a game changer for working families. I think that's an enormous expense that people spend every single year on child care. And if we get that program stood up, that's going to make a big difference too.
Changing gears a little bit, what do you hope happens with the Blackstone P&M acquisition?
Hope? It's an important issue. It really is. And I know a lot of people are concerned about it, and rightfully so. I get that. In 2019, the legislature passed the Energy Transition Act. In that, it requires by the year 2040 that we're going to have 80% renewables. By the year 2045, we're going to have 0% carbon. Those are laudable goals. Those are things we should aspire to. I think that's great. I want to encourage that at every step of the way. But in order to accomplish that, we're going to have to build out our capacity and our transmission lines. And we can't take 15 years to build a transmission line like the last one took. We have to make sure our capacity and transmission is there, because when these wind turbines or these solar panels produce that energy, it just doesn't sit around. We've got to store it, and then we got to be able to transmit it. And P&M, I think they'll be the first to tell you they don't have the money to do it, because it's going to cost billions with a B to really build out this state, to take all this renewable energy that we're going to have to get to 80%, and all the renewable energy all of us need. So Blackstone apparently has the money, and I would suggest the following. I'm okay with Blackstone under some serious qualifications. Number one, electric rates do not go up for the people of New Mexico because Blackstone comes in here. That's not acceptable. I feel very passionately about this. People are already struggling enough with affordability issues. We just left that topic, but people are struggling, and rates aren't going to go up. The second part of that is I don't want any New Mexican to lose their job. They're not going to come in here and say, well, we're changing things around and New Mexicans, we're cutting jobs or something like that. Because, of course, if we're trying to get out that, build that capacity out and that transmission ability out, they're going to be creating more jobs too. And New Mexicans need to have the priority on those jobs. It should be New Mexicans. And that's why we need to have a career path for trades. Not every kid's going to go to college. There's a lot of trade work out there that's going to continue to explode. AI doesn't turn a wrench. We know that. AI doesn't build a wind turbine or a solar farm or work on a geothermal plant or a hydrogen plant. We have to do these things, and we need people who are trained, able to do it. So with Blackstone overall, I'm concerned like everybody is when you just talk about a big company coming in. But at the same time, I want the ability to get to those goals. I want us to have a cleaner energy system in our state. And P&M isn't going to get us there. And I will say this. Recently, I don't know how many years ago it was, you guys can remind me, but we changed from having elected PRC officials to appointed PRCs. Some people have suggested to me, well, let's let the government take over our electric companies. Well, I think we've already been talking about some of the agencies and how government does on some of them. I don't necessarily think that's a good idea, because I don't want a politician dictating what your rates are based on whatever politics he thinks is right, and I don't want a politician determining the reliability of our grid. I want experts, and that's what the voters just voted for when they changed the PRC to now being appointed as experts working at the PRC. So it's not an easy issue, but at the same time, I fall down on the side of let's get a company in here with certain very contained guidelines. Like I said, not an increase on electric rates and New Mexico jobs as a priority. But let's try and achieve those goals that the Energy Transition Act asked for us.
Dan?
Sure. I just wanted to circle back. You had mentioned the Universal Child Care Initiative as part of our affordability discussion. You know, there are some indications that that might be more expensive than even projected. Do you think it's, sustainable kind of going forward long term? And do you think there should be any kind of means testing or something like that for people who qualify?
No, I do support it. I support it 110%. I think it's fantastic. I think it's a great opportunity for New Mexico to really shine in something. I think that we can have the opportunity to make it easier on every single working family out there. And I totally and 100% support it. Now, we know, though, throughout this state, there are literally child care deserts out there. We have to stand up this operation, if you will, this agency in an effective manner to make sure that we do a top-to-bottom survey of the entire state, recognizing where there is no child care and figuring out how to get that going. But staffing up and making sure it's run correctly is an important thing. But I do believe it is sustainable, and taking care of our children and increasing our child well-being is extremely important to me, and working families need that relief, and I'm 100% supportive of it. And, I don't have to tell you all this, but we rank 50th in child well-being, too.
Following up on that, Chris Bukovac that asks, the current governor of New Mexico's free childcare order is, this is not worded in the way that I understand, but generally the gist of the question is the governor's program is being challenged in the courts. If the challenge is still in the court system or stopped by the court system, what will you do to ensure that it continues? I think I just answered that. Just as I planned on talking about, a top-to-bottom survey, recognizing where the weaknesses are out there and staffing up this and having a really robust department that's actually taking care of kids.
I got
Go
one
ahead.
real quick. Earlier, I think I'm off.
You're off again.
I'll go over here. Some people don't want me here, I think.
That's not me. That's my opponent that doesn't want you here.
Behind me doing this. You mentioned earlier that we're losing doctors. We're also losing population. We lost 12,000 population last year. That's basically the size of a town of Lovington, Portales, and Artesia. Do you think the universal child care is a solution to our declining population at this point?
I don't know if it's a solution to that, but I'll tell you, I do recognize that, and it's sad that I think the prediction is in 10, 15 years we're going to be less than 2 million people if we keep going the way we're going. But I'll tell you, I'm so excited about the future of New Mexico for a number of reasons, and if you will, let me explain that. I think we can grow New Mexico in a sound way that protects the environment and also has really an economic development that is vital to the success of that one question that I mentioned that everybody asked me, is there going to be opportunity for our kids to stay here if they want to grow a family here and support a family here? We have two amazing industries, I think, at our fingertips that if we do right, we can really prosper as a state. Let's talk about number one, energy. It's no secret we're the second largest producer of oil and gas, and that provides a tremendous amount of revenue. It's half our state budget. It's $1 billion a year for education. It's 100,000 direct and indirect jobs. It's a big deal, and we should celebrate it and support it and be thankful for it. At the same time, though, we know it's going to plateau and actually go down in the future. Besides what's happening with the Iran war, we do know it's going to at some point. But New Mexico is so blessed with an abundance of natural resources. We have wind, just go outside, right? We have solar, we have geothermal, we're exploring hydrogen more and more. The opportunity for energy, we should be the energy capital of the world. And you talk about great jobs. I was just talking about the trades on building out some of the renewables. But we could really be a place that thrives in producing energy, not just oil and gas. And by the way, when it comes to oil and gas, don't for one second, just because I think a lot of the industry for what they're doing for New Mexico, don't think for one second I won't hold bad actors accountable if they pollute our water, land, or air. I will. But at the same time, what an opportunity we have on energy. But here's the second part of that. Why it's so important to have the energy we have. The high-tech world and the high-tech economy is changing so dramatically. And my gosh, do we have the perfect opportunity. You want to talk about brain power? Los Alamos National Labs. Brain power out the kazoo, right? Sandia National Labs. New Mexico Tech, UNM Research, quantum computing. Aerospace with the spaceport and White Sands Missile Range. NMSU with the Physical Science Laboratory. We have so much brain power, and so much of this technology is being developed in some of those places. We don't have to look too far back, at least for me it doesn't seem that far back, but time flies. Microsoft started in Albuquerque. They didn't like the business climate here, so they left and went to Washington. The rest is history, but think about all those jobs. Now, I'm not going to look backward. I'm going to look to the future. And when you talk about high-tech, we should have a high-tech corridor second to none from Los Alamos all the way down the Rio Grande to the border. And we can. And take some of that technology that's being developed, and I go back to my iPhone again. I talked about that when it was invented, but now let me just mention the iPhone. That's going to look like a horse and buggy, I'm told, compared to a Lamborghini in quantum computing. That's going to be the difference. And we have this window of opportunity. We have this brain power, and the first thing that people think is energy. Do we have the energy to power up all these kind of startup businesses? And we will, if we do our energy side right. The second part of that, and it's I think, besides making sure our kids are educated, is really something that's going to determine our whole future in this state, and that's water and how we handle water. And I'm happy to get into that if you want me to.
Yeah, well, actually, so this fits into this question from Cliff Ho. What is your position on the development of large AI data centers in New Mexico and our ability to provide necessary power and water in light of New Mexico's Energy Transition Act and NMED's emissions requirements?
So, if done right, I'm going to repeat that because I want to make sure it's clear. If done right, data centers can bring economic benefit to communities, and it can accelerate our renewable energy efforts in this state. And let me tell you what I mean by that. I support data centers if we're not using, I think Project Jupiter, for example, just switched now to talking about fuel cells. I think data centers should be required to use renewable energy, number one. Number two, I don't think we should be using fresh water to cool data centers. So nothing out of our aquifer, nothing out of our surface water. But I do believe that we have an opportunity, and NMSU right now is working on it. They have a whole laboratory working on this, and you just ran an article this morning or so about brackish water. Brackish water, just for those of you who don't know, brackish water, we sit on the largest brackish water aquifer in the world. 78% of New Mexico sits over brackish water. It's 3,500 feet deep. It's not the prettiest water right off the bat. It's pretty salty. But we know with the desal technologies and others that we can clean that up absolutely to an industrial level. That kind of water, it's an ocean down there. And that kind of water can be used all day long to cool data centers because we're not taking from our own freshwater aquifer, we're taking that. But let me just talk about water, if I can, on the big picture for a second. I'm not someone who just wants to grow more government or bureaucracy for the sake of it, but I do think this is important. I do think that we need to have a cabinet-level water resources department where you put the state engineer in it, you put the Interstate Stream Commission underneath it, but you're looking at the big picture. When you talk about water, we're fighting with Texas over water rights every single day and year, and that's going to continue forever. We're now fighting with other states or arguing with other states over the allotment from the Colorado River, right? It's extremely important that we get a handle on the big picture of water. Not only do we identify all of our resources, but and when I say identify our resources, right now they're currently mapping all of our underground aquifer, freshwater aquifer under the state, and they say it's going to take 8 years. It's not because we don't have the technology, it's just the manpower and getting it done. We have to supercharge that and make that happen in 2 years. Water is too fundamental. Listen, they already say, the experts, that we're going to have 25% less surface water in 25 years. That's going to be significant. And we have an agricultural community that thrives in this state. And you don't have to go very far. Whether or not you're in northern New Mexico and the acequias and the small farms up there, or you go down south to the pecan farms, the onions, and the chili. I'm so fat. But agricultural community is really important. What happens down on the pecan farms or a data center down in Las Cruces has a direct effect on Elephant Butte, the acequias, and those historic tribal water rights. All of these things are interconnected. And I know we've had the rule of law of prior appropriation for years here. But I doubt everybody knows right off the bat everybody's water rights out there, including how much a particular municipality may own or is using. We have to get the data. I'm a data kind of guy. I've done it at the office, and data makes a difference. And I think water is going to determine our future, and so we have to see the big picture, and we have to know what's going on out there, not just on water rights, but on water access and the availability of it for our future economic development, but most importantly for our people.
So Chris Bikochevak asks, on brackish water, can you explain exactly how that water will be accessed and who, whether it's the state or new industries, will pay for the infrastructure to access this water?
So I think much of it will be private industry. I do know that, for example, I just mentioned that NMSU research that's going on. They're mapping out the brackish water aquifer right now underneath us. And they showed me that, you know, when you bring up the brine with it, I mean, there's all kinds of stuff with it. All of those materials can be used 100%. 100% of those materials can be put to use, for example, like into cement. They can use that material for making cement. It's a wonderful opportunity, and we just have to get there. And I think we can, and it's too important not to do it.
And on the Colorado River Compact, Marty Strebling asks, what new options do you plan on that?
What new options?
Do you plan on that disagreement, or how do you contribute? How do you plan to resolve that disagreement?
Well, we have, I can't tell you specifically what our current administration is doing on that Colorado issue, but I do think that we need to have our experts in those discussions all day, every day, making sure that our interests are protected.
this might be the last one for me, at least kind of off the top of my head now, but I've been looking into political committees active in the campaign, and there's one group that's been critical of your opponent. That's some of the big donors are members of the Racing Commission. You're also a former member of the Racing Commission. Wanted to kind of let you clear the air on that and what voters should kind of read into these political committees.
Yes, I have friends on that are still on the Racing Commission, that were on the Racing Commission when I served on the Racing Commission, and I think the world of them. That independent PAC is not something that our campaign is coordinating with in any way, shape, or form.
Moving on, Shelley Barker asks, what is your vision for the for the state fairgrounds?
So the state fairgrounds, I think the state fair ought to stay there. Now, I also think we ought to do everything we can to uplift the area, if you will, to make it better than it is. We have, and my office deals with it every day, we have such struggles in the International District. That was an amazing neighborhood, and it's being destroyed by homeless encampments and crime, and we know all that. But I think the state fair can have a major impact by improving it, improving the amenities there, improving the housing in that area, and I want to do that. But I do believe also that the state fair should stay right in the center of Albuquerque, as it has been for many, many years. It's still one of the favorite things to go to every year for me.
Figured, Jeff, do you want to ask your question?
Can you have the state fairgrounds and build the stadium for United there at the same place?
I don't, can I? Or I'm a big supporter of United Soccer too. I love it. I haven't looked at specific plans, Jeff. I don't know, but I certainly would support it. Listen, I used to own a basketball team, a minor league basketball team in this town. Some of you might remember the Albuquerque Thunderbirds, and we had a blast. And we played at Tingley Coliseum, and I remember the NBA guys coming in because it was a minor league NBA team, saying your floor is too dusty, it's too slippery. It's too slippery, and of course we're playing in a barn, right? Tingley Coliseum. That thing was already 50 years old at that time. But no, I think it's great, and we always, those who are involved in sports and sports franchises, understand you want to be in a place where you can grow the community right outside it to provide for restaurants, and it really can have a big economic impact on the area, and I think that would be great.
I drive a plug-in Prius, and right now it's probably saving me hundreds of dollars a month. But I have talked to people who raise concerns about electric vehicle mandates in New Mexico, starting with this model year. What do you think of the electric vehicle mandates, and what would happen to them if you're governor?
I don't support these mandates as they are. I don't support EV mandates, and to me, it makes no sense. And by the way, from everything I've seen. And by the way, my youngest son is in the car business and sells EVs, don't you, back there? Some. But I do think that they're declining in the percentages of being sold, right? I think this is a major issue for government to try and dictate to a local dealership what kind of cars they have to sell or not sell. And those kind of numbers don't make any sense to me. And I don't think we have the infrastructure in New Mexico. It's a little bit different if you're talking about New York City, for example. It's very different here. We don't have the infrastructure built out, and I don't agree with it. I don't think it's productive, and I don't think it's something we should be doing, is having a mandate telling a company what kind of product they can sell, or what percentage of product they have to sell. I don't agree with it.
And these mandates, do they come, is it my understanding they're from like an environmental improvement board rule, or is the governor would have control over
yes, that? I think it is absolutely critically important that these EV mandates are not fair to local businesses, and they should not continue.
So Deborah Estrada writes, I am a native New Mexican. I recently retired as a registered nurse after 41 years of nursing. I am also a retired Navy Reserve Nurse Corps officer. My question is about the ICE detention centers in New Mexico. How many detention centers are there, and where are they located? Who is overseeing the detainees' medical care? I'm concerned that they may not be receiving the best care for their health and well-being. And if they need a higher level of care, they transfer to the hospital, and who pays for that care? Are they receiving the care that they really require? Have you visited any of these centers, and what is your perception of these facilities? And what would you do as governor to oversee these facilities?
No, I have not visited any of those facilities. I've made my position, I think, fairly well known on ICE when it comes to their enforcement actions that they've been taking across this country, what we've seen on social media, videos, and on mainstream media as well. What we saw happen in Minnesota, it's not the country that I grew up in. It's not the country I grew up in where somebody walks up with a mask on, busts out the driver's side window, and says, "Get the F out," and prove to me that you're a United States citizen, with no reasonable suspicion, no probable cause, no judicial warrant. In fact, I felt so strongly about it when some of this stuff was first going on, I sent a letter to the field office here in Albuquerque of ICE, and I said, look, what I'm seeing cannot take place in Bernalillo County. I am the chief law enforcement officer of Bernalillo County, and here I made it very clear, without reasonable suspicion, without probable cause, and without a judicial warrant, you are not allowed to restrain, confine, or detain someone. That is the definition of false imprisonment, which is a crime, and I will hold people accountable. I work with law enforcement every single day. I am so proud of law enforcement and the job they do, and God bless them. I think it's one of the hardest jobs there is in this country to do. De-escalate at one moment and then escalate at another because your life is on the line. I get that. But I also understand that just because you have a badge and a gun doesn't make you above the law. And the great thing about New Mexico, because I sit on the training council board at the Law Enforcement Academy, is that New Mexico police officers, and there's a bad apple every now and then, I get that. But New Mexico police officers who are trained in New Mexico are trained under constitutional principles. The Fourth Amendment has to mean something. And when I talk about how this is a core issue for me, and people go, wow, you're really going hard on ICE, it's because it's such a principle to me. The Constitution I have fought for my entire life. In federal court, in state court, I've stood up for people because I believe in those principles. I believe in the Fourth Amendment, which means you don't get to unreasonably search and seize someone. And so it's the same equation when I'm looking at what's happening with ICE. So I feel very strongly about it. I get a little passionate. Sorry about that.
Aaron Cohen asks, everyone complains about homelessness, but we can't just criminalize it, can we? We need real options like tiny homes or safe outdoor spaces. What can the state do to help with this problem in a constructive way?
So I'll tell you the thing that I think we can do most importantly for our crime problem and our homeless problem. And some of you may think, oh, he's the tough on crime DA, he's going to come out with some lock him up and throw away the key. That's not it. I want to hold violent criminals accountable all day long, and I will hold drug traffickers accountable all day long, the people that put the poison on the streets, and we will absolutely do our best. But I can't prosecute my way out of this addiction. The addicts, the homeless, many of them are mentally ill, many of them have addiction issues. Several administrations ago, behavioral health was basically decimated in New Mexico. We are struggling, and there are so many good people in behavioral health and mental health and addiction recovery services all over this city and all over this state that work their tails off on it. But we are so lacking in coordination. We are not coordinated or even close to being coordinated. In other words, the Department of Health should have a real-time dashboard up on their website that anybody can access any time of day, all day long, which details exactly every available bed for treatment, whether behavioral health or addiction recovery, or both, in the entire state. In the entire state. When we have these homeless encampments, it is not humane to let the person go back out who's homeless and pitch their tent on a bunch of old used needles or where someone else defecated and say someone will show up with food for you once a week or once a day. That's not being humane. But if we coordinate, like I was talking about, the Department of Health dashboard, if every nonprofit that receives any state money or government money has to report into the Department of Health either through an email or a phone call, online or whatever, every morning and say, this is how many beds we have available. Because I've lived this in real time. I've been in a courtroom where a judge has literally said to the addict, I wish I could sentence you right now to treatment, but there's no beds available. And that very same afternoon, I was in a rehab center with 14 available beds. So it's not coordinated. It's not working. Too many good people working on it, and we're not getting the results we need. So when that social worker walks up to the homeless encampment and finds the person that is absolutely and totally hit rock bottom and is willing to try and get clean or willing to try and get the behavior health they need, that social worker should be able to pull out the iPad, look right there, say, you know what, there's a bed 2 blocks away. Get in this van right over here. And there's so many good social workers out there. They would love this opportunity. Get in the van right over there. We'll drive you. You'll get 3 squares. You'll get a roof over your head, temporary housing, and most importantly, we'll get you the treatment that you need. But without coordination, and we have all the technology, to me this seems just fairly simple, but we're just not getting it done. And we can spend a lot of money, and we have to spend a lot of money. We not only have to spend money, but we also have to hire the people doing that work. We have to staff up, but we have to coordinate it.
I know I said I was done, but I got one more. And I think I've asked you this question before, but you've talked on the campaign trail about standing up to President Trump, you know, and on ICE and other issues. You know, is there a risk of doing that in a state like New Mexico where we are so reliant on federal spending? You mentioned the Medicaid figures and things like that.
Well, I can tell you when it comes to President Trump, I'm not going to go be some shrinking violet. Look, the governor is the last line of defense between the chaos coming out of Washington and the effect that it has on everyday New Mexicans. I mean, we have to have a tough, strong governor. And by the way, if you're not willing to debate me on a stage, you're not probably tough enough to stand up to Trump. But really, I mean, we have to push back. We have to. Sometimes all you're going to be able to use is the bully pulpit. Sometimes you use the courthouse. But when chaos or Donald Trump is doing things that are hurting everyday New Mexicans, the governor has to stand up and fight back and do everything they possibly can, because this is who the governor represents, the people of New Mexico.
You had a question, Ryan? Oh, no. Oh, sorry.
You have one more, Ryan? I just have one more. I'll just kind of sum it up. Do you feel like you have the momentum? Do you feel like you have the momentum, and are you going to win this race?
Yes and yes. 100%. I've been doing this now for a year off and on. Of course, it wasn't as intense when I first started. But I've been all over this big, beautiful state. And people want someone who's going to get things done. And Jeff, everywhere I go, I feel the momentum growing. I feel there is a sharp contrast between me and my opponent in this race. There's going to be far different outcomes depending on whether or not I win or Deb wins.
Well, to that end, there's a question from Cliff Ho who says, the Albuquerque Journal recently printed a full-page table comparing your policies with those of Representative Deb Haaland. To be honest, the statements and positions seemed very similar. What are specific policy differences that exist between you and Haaland, and how will they benefit New Mexico?
I would ask everybody to look, first of all, at my website. I cannot get into every single policy here in an hour and a half. But I have 189 pages of policy. And I've printed that and asked for debates for a long time. And because my opponent has not been willing to debate, not even willing to sit up here and take questions, I don't know really where she stands on a lot of issues. And I think people, for the most part, are tired of platitudes about, yeah, we do this or this. They want they want some specifics. I give those specifics, and I will continue to give those specifics. But to be very frank with you, despite the fact that I've been on the campaign trail and probably seen her speak probably 4 or 5 times a month at least for the last 6 months, I have no idea where she stands on things.
Marcy Gretz asks, explain your thoughts on your opponent's fundraising and why she is receiving millions from outside of New Mexico. What should we be concerned about her debt to outside entities?
I don't know that I can comment on what the purpose of her raising so much money. I think recently I heard my opponent speak to the fact that she's a national figure. And I think next she's going to do a book tour after this primary. And that's fine. But I am so proud of the people right here in New Mexico who have been contributing to my campaign. 80%, over 4,000 people, New Mexicans, have contributed and are supporting this campaign because they appreciate my vision and where I want to take this state. I do know that, you have 80% of her money coming from outside of the state. I don't know. Let's focus on New Mexico.
Evangelina Olguin asks, what is your plan for the next 2 weeks? Polls say otherwise, but supporters say you can defeat Deb. How are you and your campaign going to win this primary?
By getting everybody out to vote. It is the single... It's no secret. This isn't a secret. I'm not giving any political secret here. The more people that vote, the more likely I'm going to be your next governor, right? So let's get out and vote. So that's the answer. And both Democrats and independents.
Talking about governance now, Joan M. Waters asks, the current administrations, state and federal, have oftentimes based the selection of cabinet members on personal loyalty rather than competence. Obviously, a governor needs his or her appointees to pursue a shared agenda. However, behind closed doors, vigorous debate is healthy. Would a Bregman administration require sycophancy from its appointees, or would it be open to hearing what it made to hear, as well as what it's made to hear, as well as it wants to hear?
So I know in the audience today right now I have at least one, I can't see everybody, but at least one chief deputy in my office who's out there. I surround myself with really smart people. And that I attribute most of the success that we've had at the DA's office. Every now and then, 2 o'clock in the morning, I'll wake up, this brilliant idea about how to just knock crime out of the water and just we'll never have any crime again. So I go in, and I have 4 chief deputies. They all have different divisions. I have a district manager, and I have other executive staff in there, and I tell them, listen to this idea that I came up with. And I lay it all out, and of course they're respectful to the boss. They're going to be respectful. And then I say, so what do you guys think? And they'll all look at each other. And not one of them is afraid to go, that's the craziest thing we've ever heard. And that's important. I treasure that. I want people who are in leadership roles around me to tell me when I'm full of it, to tell me when I'm lost my marbles, or to say, you know what? How are we going to get past this hurdle? If you could tell me how we can do that, that makes some sense. That back and forth is really important to leadership. And I think it's that same back and forth that I get to ask them 20 minutes later into that Monday morning meeting, what's going on in your department? What's going on in your division? How are we doing? How are the numbers? What's happening? Why, by the way, did we lose that case? Why weren't we prepared? But that back and forth accountability and that meeting with leaders of the divisions in the office, it makes a real difference. So, no, I'm gonna put in place the most qualified people I can possibly find to do the job. Because at the end of the day, New Mexico state government affects every single person in this state. Every person is the customer of state government, if you will, one way to look at it. we better be getting it right, because it's very different from most businesses. Because people's health and well-being, education and safety depend on the quality of our state government. That's why we got to get it right. That's why I'm going to hold everybody accountable. And so I'm going to put the best people I possibly can in those jobs and hold them accountable, and they'll hold people accountable, and we're going to get things done.
Kathy Economy asks, what would you do differently as governor relative to the current governor?
Well, I'm sure knowing the current governor, and she's a friend, I'm sure we have different leadership styles. I'll start there. But I don't know particularly that I'm going to point out something that's I'm going to be very different on, although I will say this. I can't say enough good things about her sense of making sure that this early childhood department got off the ground and started rocking and rolling. I think that is just fantastic. I think it's going to make a huge difference for child well-being, for families, for working families. I think it's fantastic. I've got a little bit of a different leadership style. I will tell you that. I want to make sure I'm doing but she's also focused on public safety a lot, but public safety is important. All the 4 issues that I've talked about, I think she's done a good job on trying to make things better, but I think we can continue that work and change New Mexico for the better.
Stacy Sacco asks, I've taught over 3,000 business students at UNM over the past 20 years, and about half of them have said they were leaving the state following their graduation. When I asked why, they said there weren't any jobs here, so how could they stay? What can we do for them to either help them find a job or create their own job to start a business here?
So I mentioned earlier about 2 areas in which I think our economy can really benefit from, and we have a window of opportunity now in energy and high tech. I'll also say that we need to create career paths, not just for the business students like she mentioned, but career paths for young people who aren't going to go into college, but are for trades and things of that nature. New Mexico needs to be the best place there is to start, sustain, and keep a small business. Number 1, government should not be in the way. I've owned a lot of small businesses in my life. I talked about a basketball team a little bit ago. I know how hard it is. I know how hard it is when you have employees and their entire families are counting on you for your paycheck. I've signed the front of a lot of paychecks. And it's important to recognize what government does and doesn't do, or does and doesn't do, how that affects small business. So right off the bat, for every job a small business creates, I want to give a $5,000 tax credit, because we want to encourage that growth in small businesses. Small businesses account for 99% of businesses in New Mexico and half the entire workforce. So we better be making this a place where you can continue to grow your business, but also a place where you can start it up. And whether or not it's startup of an IT or a startup of a restaurant or a startup of a plumbing company, whatever it might be, government doesn't need to get in the way. We need to make it so it's logical to get in the business and prosper. Red tape is ridiculous when it comes to, small businesses. When you start one right now, you have to almost hire a lawyer to fill out all the forms. Between tax and rev, permitting, licensing, everything else, we need to have one portal, make it real easy. It's a one-stop portal. You want to start a small business, here are all your forms. We have all this technology now. We might as well put it to use. Click here, click there, click there, click there. Get this number from that one and put it on this form. You don't need to hire a lawyer to do that. I'm talking about as a lawyer, but you don't need to hire a lawyer to do that. Let's make it easy to start that business. And when it comes to new permitting and new licensing, it's a problem throughout state government. We don't have enough staffing. Regulation and licensing needs more staffing. All kinds of different entities need more staffing. We have to do a better job of recruiting people and getting them in. I have a proven track record of that. I'm going to focus on that.
Long-term interest rates have been trending up for the last month or so. Should New Mexico be concerned?
Long-term interest rates, well, whenever interest rates are going up too high, yeah, that makes it, the cost of capital is going to cost more. So actually hurts economic development. We know that, and we don't want our mortgage rates going up either if you're on an adjustable mortgage. And if they go up, you're not going to be able to afford the house that you thought you could before they went up.
Francisco Ortiz asks, this week the New York Post stated New Mexico has the biggest drug problem and was voted by the Post as the worst state in the country. Question, what policies in the past decade are the reasons for New Mexico has reached this low point?
Well, fentanyl. Fentanyl is the worst drug in the history of my lifetime. I've been on the planet for 62 years. There's never been a drug close to this bad. Never been one even close. The way it gets people so hooked so quick, and they get this high for 20, 25 minutes, 30 minutes, and they want to keep that high, but then they crash when they don't have any more, and it's painful, and they're so addicted. I know people that have come in our office that were trying to get treatment that are on 50 to 75 pills a day of fentanyl. And it's so cheap, right? It's 50 cents, $1 for a pill. And sometimes cheaper than that. Fentanyl is another, well, I talked about it earlier about how we need to go after the drug traffickers, and we will, and we are. But I can't prosecute my way out of fentanyl. We have to have a robust, coordinated behavior health and addiction recovery system. And if we don't do that, then we're going to be fighting this all the time. And look, someone gets arrested this afternoon at the International District. They get arrested, they're taken down because it's a 4th-degree felony. When you commit a felony, you're arrested. You go down to jail. You see the judge that afternoon or the next day. The judge lets you out because you're not a threat to society in the sense that you're going to harm them. But you walk out, and instead of taking that ride from the van into the integration center, you take a left, and you're back out on the streets, and you're looking for your next pill. We can do better than this. We have to.
Marilee Daneman asks, you mentioned a few tax cuts. Would implementing these cuts increase the portions of state revenue that rely on oil and gas?
Could you say the last part? Would it increase?
So would implementing these tax cuts increase the proportions of state revenue that relies on oil and gas? So meaning, like, if you cut taxes and there's less revenue coming in, would you then make up for that by pulling more from the oil and gas?
No,
revenue?
not necessarily, no. I'm just going to leave it at that, no. I'm not going to get into a half-an-hour tax dissertation here.
Okay. So Norma Netartari asks, as governor, how would you deal with Donald Trump's authoritarian demands and punitive behavior? Other state leaders seem to cower. Will you?
No, I will not cower. I used shrinking violet earlier. I will not be a shrinking violet. I will stand up each and every time necessary to the chaos coming out of Donald Trump and the rest of Washington, quite frankly. I mean, it's some of the times, I mean, I look at the folks who are in place, and it's head scratching. But listen, we're going to stand up every time we need to for New Mexicans.
Ryan? Oh, you know, okay. There's a series of questions back on microgrids and on data centers.
Yeah.
Would you support bringing microgrids under the ETA?
So what I want to support is making, to be very frank with you, I don't know all the ramifications of doing that right off the bat. I will say that. Sometimes you don't know the actual perfect answer to that. I don't know. But I do know this. I want to see data centers powered with renewable energies. And that's obviously a huge part of the Energy Transition Act, right? The huge part of the Energy Transition Act is making sure that we get to 80% renewables by 2040 and 0% carbon by 2045. We should be doing that all the time. And when I talk about data centers, if done right, can accelerate renewable energy, that's exactly what happens. Because if they build the wind or solar, make those efforts, then you're going to speed up that whole transmission and capacity, and that's what needs to happen.
Would you support prohibiting the use of NDAs by data centers?
NDAs and
So tech companies often require that government employees to sign non-disclosure agreements as they negotiate the terms for development of data centers. By the time the public learns of the planned data center, public input is virtually meaningless. Is this secrecy necessary, or is it just deployed to dampen public opposition until it's too late?
I'm not in support of anything that dampens transparency. So I think the short answer to that is no. I'm not specifically understanding what the context of what that non-disclosure agreement is, but for the most part, I think the public should absolutely have knowledge of what's going on when it comes to anybody that wants to do a large development like a data center in our state.
Would you support a moratorium on new data centers for, say, 18 to 24 months to allow New Mexico time to develop appropriate rules for data centers?
No, I don't think that just a moratorium is a way to go. I think every single different project is going to raise different concerns, but at the same time, I don't want to just say we're blanket saying no to this kind of economic development. If the data center does what I want it to do, which means it's using not a drop of fresh water, not increasing rates, and actually using renewable energy to power it, I don't have really a problem with that.
Would you support legislation to prohibit or restrict the use of IRBs for data centers? Companies worth hundreds of billions of dollars don't need tax incentives to build data centers. They can afford to pay their fair share.
So I understand the question, and I respect the fact that we want to make sure that we're not just giving IRBs away to anybody and everybody, but I also don't know that there's an actual limit, that we should start placing a limit on a company's net worth before we agree to an IRB or not. I don't think that makes sense.
Okay, I'm going to finish off with the last question from Emily Howard before I give you time for a closing statement. Emily Howard, the head of Economic Forum here in Albuquerque. In a recent poll conducted by Economic Forum, 96% of Albuquerque area residents said local economic growth was important to them. What is your vision for a prosperous economic future for New Mexico, and how will you lead us there?
Well, I talked about a little bit of it earlier when I talked about two major sectors I want to see New Mexico really grow in and excel in. One was energy, one was high tech, and I think we have the foundation for both those. In energy, we have the natural resources. In high tech, we have all the brain power in the world. I, at the same time, want to do everything we can to promote small businesses. Like I said earlier, 99% of businesses in New Mexico are small businesses. And we can do a lot to make sure that we are doing everything we can that they prosper. Small businesses actually prosper, and we want them to grow. And so when it comes to red tape with government, I want to eliminate as much of that as possible. And red tape doesn't mean we don't regulate and don't make sure we're dotting our I's and crossing our T's when it comes to regulations for small businesses. But let's get out of the way and help them succeed. Let's incentivize the tax code for businesses, not punish businesses with the tax code. And there is a distinction on that. When I talk about a credit, for example, for small businesses, for every job they produce, a $5,000 tax credit, that's because we want to encourage businesses to grow. It's the same thing when you talk about eliminating the gross receipts tax on medical services. The patient can't even get that. The patient can't even get that tax. But the doctor's having to pay it now, and makes them at an unfair disadvantage to the rest of the state. So we should use our tax system to actually encourage business, not discourage it, and in fact, in some ways, prohibit it. I've owned small businesses my whole life. I know it's the backbone of our economy in every way, shape, and form. We can't just rely on big projects, and we can't just rely on government jobs. I mean, when government jobs, when they're cuts, it affects a lot of people. We need to have a robust local economy in the state of New Mexico.
I'm going to give you a couple minutes for a closing statement, and I want to apologize to the audience. We had more questions than we've ever had for any town hall. There were over 70 of them, and I couldn't get to all of them. So,
And I'm going hoarse because of all those questions. No. I have, so closing. I'm thrilled that I got through all this. No. I'm really thrilled to have this opportunity. Thank you to the Albuquerque Journal. Thank you to all of you who came out here. And we're going to change New Mexico for the better. I talked about being attacked because of success before. It's not success when we're first in the country in crime. It's not success when we're 50th in education. But it is success when we know that things are getting better. And we can improve on all these things. We can be this place, New Mexico, that lives up to its potential. I truly, truly believe that. We have to have somebody who's going to be tough to push back on all this stuff in Washington, of course. But it's not just Washington. We face these challenges right here. We have to fix crime. We have to fix our education system. And with the help of a lot of federal dollars, we have to fix our healthcare system right here. And what kind of economic development and opportunity are we going to give our kids and our grandkids in the future is going to depend now on whether or not we seize this window opening, if you will, when it comes to high tech. Because if we don't take advantage of this opportunity, there's plenty of other states that will. If we don't take an opportunity and advantage of the opportunity we have with energy and all of the renewable energy we have, if we don't build out our capacity and our ability to transmit it to keep all of our rates low and our grid reliable, then other states will get that, and we won't. So I know how important this election is. I've had the privilege of being here my entire life. I know how special this place is. And my job as your next governor is to protect the welfare and safety of every single New Mexican, and I take that very, very seriously. I look forward to the opportunity, but here's the most important thing I got to tell you. You know, in the old days, way back when I was in politics first starting when I was age 18, it was knocking on doors and making phone calls, licking stamps on envelopes. Now it's all social media. Every single person out there has a social media account, a Facebook account that you communicate with your family and your friends. I need everybody to get on your social media. I need you all to tell your circle of friends and your families to get out there and vote because this election's too important. And the difference, and I think you all know this, the difference could not be more drastic between myself and my opponent. So thank you for the time and thank you for the attention. I really appreciate being here. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. That concludes our town hall with Sam Bregman. If you liked what you saw tonight, we hope you'll consider subscribing to the Albuquerque Journal, and that is the conclusion of our series of gubernatorial candidates.